truck. John Lamb Lash. This is one of your books, Not in His Image. Powerful, powerful book. You basically have been, I mean, you've written many other books. I can't even go into all of them. I'll mention The Hero, Manhood and Power, Quest for the Zodiac, Twins and the Double. I mean, you're a prolific writer and researcher. And what I really want to get into is more of your understanding of the Gnostic tradition, because this is something that resonates with me deeply. I want to start by giving you I'll give you a little bit of my interpretation. And I would love how you see this playing into the Gnostic version of reality. So I see creation as natural life. Basically there's a creation that is feminine. God is a woman energy, female energy, right? The womb, the mother. And this creation that we all are a part of and live within in this world, in this cosmos that we know, one of many universes. Within this creation, there is a dark side, right? An archonic force, some kind of imitation force that essentially mimics creation, feeds on creation, and is basically perpetuating replication, simulations, and other things as derivative or oftentimes antagonistic of that primordial life-giving force that all living things are still connected to.
Yes. So that's paraphrase. Have you drawn that from reading my book recently, or that's something you've had working for a long time?
So it's a mixture of things. I actually read the Nag Hammadi texts, the Robinson translation, back in my 20s, and didn't fully get it. Honestly, it's a lot, right? The actual
Nobody gets it. Nobody
right?
gets it. You can't get it from Robinson. It's like a Denver omelet in a gravity black hole.
Right.
There's just no way to make any sense out of it. It's a jumble.
Exactly. So when I read it at first, I got certain key pieces out of it. I thought the archonic thing was cool and interesting. And then over time, you kind of figure out, okay, is this AI a new thing? No, the artificial intelligence is an ancient thing. So let's then talk about what I just described. This was something that came to me really through a journey. I did a medicine journey with ayahuasca, and that narrative came through very powerfully to me based on, again, years of research. And so, and having come across your work a little while ago, I was drawn back to it. And so I've been reading this, but again, given that story that I just gave you was simply something that came through in my journey and my understanding. And so I wanted you to kind of give a richer, fuller interpretation based on your years of research into this.
In the first place, Gnostic cosmology is a highly rigorous and specific description. It's not metaphysical, it's not vague. Basically, the sacred narrative, which contains the cosmology in a descriptive form, gives the account of an event that happened in the galaxy in which the solar system is located, very specifically. So it is assumed in the Gnostic cosmology already that the universe exists. By the way, on that note, I'd like to say that in my syntax, the universe with a capital U means everything. There are no multiple universes. There's just one comprehensive universe. Then in that universe, physically, materially, there are countless billions of galaxies. And in some of these galaxies, there are planetary systems, and we are in one of them. So that is the specific setting. It doesn't make any grand statements about the origin of the universe as such. It talks about something that happened in our galaxy, okay? And so you can carry that, those specifications forward to the picture of the archons. According to that material at Nag Hammadi, the archons are unique to this solar system. They are not some dark force just roaming at large in the universe. In fact, the Gnostics never posited anything of that sort, and nor would I myself. Now, I take it that you're something of a psychonaut, if you don't mind using a quaint old term. So, psychonauts explore the universe and they explore consciousness, correct? So, they were psychonauts and they were able to detect the presence of these exobiological extraterrestrial entities, which are parasitical in nature. They're sort of like android cyborgs. And if you're getting through my book, I don't know how far you might be in the reading of it, but I make it really clear, and I always have from the beginning, that the Gnostic material, you have to go through it with a really fine-tooth comb, and not just once. You have to go through it many, many times. But I have shown that the ancient seers were specific in describing the archons in their exobiological or extraterrestrial form. And they said that there were two types. They said there's one that is described by the bizarre trope, which you only find in the Gnostic writings, of the aborted fetus, which is the word huhe in Coptic. And what that actually, one way to read that is, it's a premature fetus. So it looks like it has a big head, bug eyes, spindly limbs, and there you have the portrait of the gray aliens, correct?
Yep, very much.
Additionally, they said there was another type, which was a dracon, which translates as reptilian. So the reptilian type of archon is the overlord, is the dracon. And then the archon horde or hive consists of countless millions of these embryonic gray aliens. And they describe that. There is evidence of that. That is a very great fact, that you find those descriptions in the ancient materials that survive. And of course, the original materials and the original teaching predated by millennia the received materials that have survived.
And so before we get into more of the cosmology, what is the origin of the Gnostic thought? How ancient are we talking? How many thousands of years? What culture basically gave birth to this understanding?
Culture that gave birth to what we have inherited after many millennia, and we have inherited it in a very mangled and incomplete form, because it is the intel that has been the most suppressed and attacked of everything that has been known to the human species. But if you want to go back to the taproot, it goes back to Aryan Caucasian peoples in the Caucasus Mountains and on the Urmian Plateau of northern Iran. And there was, as far as I can tell from my research, the home base of what I call the Magian order. And the Magian order probably took definition around 6000 BC. So it's many millennia old, many millennia old. And what we call the Gnostics today, as I say in my book, they didn't call themselves Gnostics. It's a insult. It means a smart ass, a know-it-all. And it was used to insult them by the Christian ideologues who were attacking them. But they called themselves teleste, meaning those who are aimed, those who have an aim, a purpose, those who know where we're going, you see. And so the movement of the Telestai founded the mystery schools in different regions of the Middle East, in the Levant, in Syria, in Egypt, and then those mystery schools spread across all of Europe as a network of cells. And the taproot of that whole movement, that diverse movement, was the Magian order, going back to ancient Persia.
Indeed. And in terms of some of the Gnostic texts later, the ones that were from Nag Hammadi, these were written, if I'm correct, closer to the first centuries AD, no?
Well, nobody really knows. It's unfortunate that the primary writings come down in the Coptic language, because Coptic is not really a language. I've argued that it's a shorthand. And so they were supposed to be Greek originals. So there are supposed to be copies in Coptic of Greek originals. This is a very dubious theory, but all Gnostic scholars adhere to it because they don't know any better. And they would look embarrassed if they say, we actually don't have a clue. Okay? But the writings that you find in Nag Hammadi and elsewhere, because there are a couple of other codexes, like the Berlin Codex and the Bruce Codex, it's impossible to date them. They certainly are in pre-Christian centuries. But unfortunately, the surviving form in the books that were found in Egypt, December 1945, date from about 300 or 325 CE. So you're really looking, it's like being on a crime scene where you're just finding shreds of evidence, and that's only the evidence that was left years after the crime was committed. You see what I'm saying? Yeah,
Of course.
it's tough.
Of course.
You have to be a real bulldog detective to get into the core of this Gnostic material.
So going back to the cosmology now, as I was saying, my understanding is that this life-giving principle is a feminine force, right? The Sophia is called in Gnosticism. And essentially this life-giving principle, it can be personified by Gaia, let's say, if we want to say Gaia Earth, the mother womb of creation as we know it in our cosmos. And from this life force, there is an archonic structure, right? An archonic overlordship, essentially, that is trying to hijack, imitate, I would say artificially replicate life, right? Feed upon life even, and essentially mimic it. And so this is the struggle that we have seen, and perhaps is described in Zoroastrianism and other religions as like the dark and the light, and the dark epitomized by this sort of artificial anti-life force. No?
Well, I personally don't ever use this dark light dichotomy. And can I tell you why briefly?
Of course.
As a psychonaut, I've been around the block a few times, okay? I've used a number of power plants, plant teachers. I always use them in a ritualistic way, in a very rigorous way, sober. Taken ayahuasca a few times, but primarily I have used psilocybin mushrooms, which I find are the best emissaries for going to the Nahual, or the supernatural. So in my various journeys into the Nahual, and also I must add that I've also encountered the Nahual without the use or assistance or guidance of these plant teachers. So I've had it both ways, right? The paranormal and the supernatural have impinged upon my life profoundly from the age of 4 years old. I have never encountered any dark or evil forces in the universe, ever. Going back to what I said before, the problem with the archons is unique to our solar system and unique to this Earth. They cannot invade the Earth. They cannot live on the Earth. Yet, because they are parasitical by nature, they want to try to intrude, and they want to destroy it. They're really mindlessly destructive. For instance, and this is a really important point to understand if you want to try out the genuine Gnostic viewpoint, because you can turn around and take anything that can be said about the archons in the Gnostic scenario and turn it around today to IT and so-called AI. There's no such thing as artificial intelligence, by the way. All intelligence is alive, and AI is not alive. But when you look at AI in our world today, unless extremely strict limits were put on the use of AI, it becomes archontic and destructive, and it's destroying people's minds, their memories, it's destroying social relationships, it's destroying the ability to do business, it's destroying the ability for human beings to be honest with each other. So you see in the presence of IT, informational technology, computers, you actually see the presence and impact of the archontic mindset. They have cracked into our world. That's one way they do it. IT and computer technology is not a creation of the archons. It's created by human beings, obviously, and we know who they are. You know, Norbert Weiner, Claude Shannon, the people who laid down the algorithms for all that we're using right now. But however, it does represent the danger of an alien mindset overtaking the human mind if we don't get a picture of what it is and learn how to handle it. Am I making sense?
Yeah, but I guess what confuses me is you say that you haven't seen a dark force, but you speak of the archons as essentially a parasitic force that could be described as dark.
Well, if you want to, that's my second point I want to make. It's just, we won't quibble about semantics. But I really don't like this idea that dark is something bad. I'm a creature of the dark. I love the dark. I'm someone who many people consider to be perhaps the only living person today who can read the sky and read the constellations. I've spent a great deal of my life in the dark. And so metaphorically, you can say dark means evil, dark means bad, but can you see, I don't like that. And also, as I said, as a psychonaut, the universe is founded on love. It's an expression of love. There is no Zoroastrian cosmic battle between light and dark in the universe, as far as I can tell. Maybe I missed that memo.
Okay, no, I hear you, and I agree with you in the dark. It's a bad metaphor essentially, but we're talking about the chaotic, destructive force of the archonic nature and the archonic feeding upon life and negation of life, right? And the idea of even, as described, the idea of the Yaldabaoth, right? The sort of the demiurge that essentially tries to hijack creation, right? However we want to describe this factor, certainly seems to have played itself out throughout human history and still does in terms of taking us away from the life-giving principles, right? And the life-affirming practices, and to become caught up in these structures.
Well, I could answer that in two ways. First of all, Yaldabaoth is a strange name you only find in the Gnostic writings. They also call him Samael or Saklas, fool, blind one. Why did they call him that? Why did the ancient seers add those terms? What are the connotations of those terms? The base, extraterrestrial base of the archons is Saturn. And you think of it as a radio station. So they broadcast from Saturn. Now, the Yaldabaoth is sort of like the main broadcaster. It's the center of the archonic hive mind. They do have a mind, but it's more like an insect mind. They're like insect cyborgs. And many people have encountered them in the twilight zone of ET encounters. Because as I point out, this is a bit of a digression because I want to make my second point about the archons. As I point out, the Gnostics warned us about their powers, and one of their powers is called Hal, which literally means virtual reality or simulation. So they can project themselves into the human psyche and appear as if they are here in our environment by using Hal. In fact, the people who have had these close encounters and these abduction experiences which are actually described in the Gnostic text, are, it's as if you had put the headset around them and they were in a virtual reality mode. The archons can do that, and they have done that. They have been intent upon breaking into this experiment we're in on Earth and destroying it for millions of years. And it was only until quite lately, recently, in historical time, that they did succeed in hacking into the human species. And this was a particular event at a particular time involving particular people. Okay? So they have hacked in. It's a neuronal hack. It's not a genetic hack. They haven't hacked into the genome.
Mm-hmm.
They've hacked into the actual neuronal circuitry of the human animal. This they have done. And so there are those in our midst today, in our midst, who are archontified human beings. They're actually running on the alien mindset program. And you know that from their behavior, which is predatory and parasitical. It's not a big mystery. It looks complicated when you're walking around the sides of it, but the more you get into the center of it, the simpler it is.
Well, I love this because it can help us explain a lot to me in terms of the nature of what we've understood about rituals and blood sacrifice and energy feeding that goes on, right? And trying to understand the psychology of evil and these people that would do these types of things, right? And feeding on other humans in such a way. So again, it makes sense if it's an archonic force, but when did that occur? When did that hack occur?
Around 1800 BC.
And what does that look, what did that look like? How do we know that was the time?
Well, that's my intel. You can take it or leave it. I'm not saying it off the top of my head that it's something I invented. I've done a lot of research. The best I can say is that on the basis of the research I have done, combining historical research with psychonautic investigation, I've determined that this event happened at this time in a certain way. And there are clues not only in the Gnostic material, but in other Middle Eastern mythologies as well. And even the Bible itself, if I may dare to mention such a sacred text, you know, being a heretic, I shouldn't even be allowed to talk about things like the Bible. But even in the Bible itself, it describes the encounter in which this hack occurred.
So one interpretation, right, would be that Yaldabaoth is the unnamed god that essentially takes Abraham as his chosen lineage, right? But it also is curious because this is the God that says, don't sacrifice your child, unlike other previous other gods that have perhaps asked for human sacrifice, right? Sacrificing to Moloch and other so-called gods or entities, right? So the question has always been, you know, we know that the Bible has been adjusted over time. It's been rewritten, right? There's been Jewish captivities in Babylon. There's so many different variations, but how do you see the Gnostic mythology essentially explaining the biblical patriarchy?
You don't even have to go there if you keep to the Gnostic standard. You don't even have to go there. It becomes a shaggy dog story. Hearing about, oh, does Yahweh demand sacrifice? Does he not? Yes, no, this, that, and the other. Oh, he was going to sacrifice his son, but it was only a token thing. And in the end, well, he really didn't, or really did he? You know, you don't even have to go there. All you have to know is that the Gnostics warned that the archons lie. So whatever you read coming from them is going to be a lie, and you're going to wear your mind out trying to figure out how that lie works. You see? So you bring up something that, of course, is at the core of the Gnostic message to humanity. You said it. Yaldabaoth chose a people to be his vehicle. And then that happened around 1800 BC. And coming forward from there, there was active in human society that alien mindset. And today we are at the end game of that alien mindset. It is playing its last cards as we speak.
Yes.
I don't know if you had it across your mind, but I think you would agree that it's pretty bizarre and pretty remarkable that you find this trope of the aborted fetus. I don't know any other cosmology that uses this exact trope. So that's a dead sign, a direct sign that the archons are involved if you're using this aborted fetus trope. And what do we find today? Well, in 1996, I think, a team of biomedical team produced a cell strain that contains material from the aborted fetus of a 14-month-old Caucasian male. So a mythological, cosmological image from this remote Gnostic material comes right down to today, and here it is today, and they're going to be serving it up to you at the end of a needle.
I see yes, of course. Well, they use fetal parts in terms of the vaccinations.
Yes.
So this gets me to the question you mentioned that they have not affected our genetics, but do we not read that into the Anunnaki stories of the Sumerians that they were involved in tampering these? Was it not an archonic force? Was it something else that was involved in tampering with human DNA and claiming that they created us? I don't believe that they created us, but they certainly could have done some effect upon our DNA at that time period. No.
Well, remember the watchword of the Gnostics: the archons always lie. Their joy is in deceit. Just because something is written on clay tablets that are, 3,000, 4,000 years old, doesn't mean it's true. Any more than what's written in the newspaper today mean it's true. Now, we could talk for days about the Sitchin Anunnaki scenario. I've written about it at length. Basically, I think that the Gnostic intel, which actually addresses that scenario, is more reliable. So I do not directly identify the archons with the Anunnaki. It's really problematical. Yeah.
Well, again, because you get the fallen angel lore within, like, the Book of Enoch, for example, and other texts, right? And this idea of, again, in various interpretations, whether it was the fallen ones were fallen angels, dragons, some kind of bloodlines, right? That was different, that was started to merge, right? An alien, some kind of alien bloodline that merged with man, that basically gives us what we are now currently, different from Neanderthal, different from other potential evolutionary conditions of what the human could have become, right? So,
well, that's a huge story that's floating around. I have to say I do not subscribe to that story. It wasn't a bloodline intervention. They're not that lucky. That's maybe why they need blood. You see what I mean? No, it was a neurological hack. It introduced something like nanobot or nanoscale entities into the neuronal circuits. And they take over the entire, they capture the entire neuronal circuitry. So in the ideal case of the success of the archons, there would be a human animal standing in front of you, human being. I always say human animal, bear with me. And it would, in fact, not be operating like a human being, but would be working from a broadcast radio beam from outside this planet. A remote control. This is what they warned about.
Sure. But then why do they need energy, in a sense of human energy feeding magical ritual energy feeding, let's say blood feeding, right? Actual blood sacrifice. Why do they need that? Do we know?
Well, according to the Gnostics, uh, it all comes down to phonos, Phthhonos, envy. It's all about envy. They actually have envy. In fact, envy is the driving force of the archons. Now, bear in mind, I tell you, these Gnostic clues, my friend, are semtex. They are semtex. And you have to hold on to them and handle them carefully because they are so explosive. They really blow the whole game wide open, in my opinion. So the neuronal hack is not a genetic hack. One thing that one needs to be really careful about if you're going to go look at the Sumerian materials, okay, the Sumerian tablets and so forth, you have to realize that, like a detective, you have to evaluate the evidence and where's the evidence coming from. It was customary back in that time for the theocrats in the Middle East to have many consultants in their court. And in some cases, the consultants were really the handlers, just as you see today in politics, right? Look at American politics. The handlers are running the show. And who were the handlers back in the time of the ancient theocrats? Well, they were soothsayers, channelers, and psychics. And they basically pampered to the ego of the theocrats. So they told the theocrats stories that would inflate their egos and inflate their sense of importance. And this, I believe, is where these bloodline stories come from. As far as I know, there is no evidence that there has been interbreeding between the archons and human beings. Now, there are many people who would flat out shoot me down on that one, but I'm only here to tell you what I know.
Sure. Well, I mean, there is the empirical accounts of people, right, who experienced abductions and seen either they've been invaded sexually, right, by greys or reptilians, right? The concept of not just the anal probe, but actual sexual encounters. Some people even saying that they've had children, hybrid children with these beings, and this whole notion that's been studied by some, you know, of actual hybrids on the earth, right, walking the earth that are some kind of hybrid human alien. You know, again, how you can verify that.
It's very difficult. I have never seen convincing evidence or verification of that. Obviously, there's a lot of rumors floating around. But so what if it was true? What does it prove? How does it help? What difference does it make? Everything that the Gnostics taught, if you bring it forward today and restore it carefully and handle it correctly, goes right to the core of the problems we're facing today. And it's actionable and relevant, in my opinion.